part of this discussion is actually me asking these guys what's Web3, but we'll get to that later. I'm going to start off with letting everybody give an introduction of themselves. First I'll introduce myself. That's sort of just what the agenda for today is. Running through a quick VC perspective, a friend of mine moderating one of the other UGC panels told me it's my job to drop the bomb and give a very controversial outlook so that we can spark some controversy and we can debate it, the silliness back and forth. But I'm expecting Fight Club with wiffle bats here, folks, so don't hold back. I told them to be very harsh about everything and say what they really think. We're going to go into a variety of topics. This is going to be like the off-roading of panels because the problem is with Web Tool panel, I think we touch about every other topic out there. So we'll be talking about business models and UGC and the role of mobile and social networks. And most of all, though, I do want to make it interactive and have you guys be able to ask what you want because after all, this is probably the 10th Web Tool panel you've sat through, so you're wondering what's new as well. A bit about myself. My name is Tim Chang with Gabriel Venture Partners. I'm a partner there, and I lead the mobile and digital media and entertainment sectors there. So I've invested in companies like iSpot, sort of a remix, mashup platform for mobile user-generated video, Kajit, tween-facing MVNO, and a whole host of other physical widget companies that go into cell phones that enable you to do fun things on cell phones. Spend a lot of time looking at gaming and virtual worlds and all that sort of thing. So we've got a very esteemed panel here we'd like to introduce to you very quickly. We'll start at the far end of the table with Gilles Villan-Rosa, CEO of Azurius. Next to him is Roger Raderman, co-founder and CMO product officer of Beaker. To his right, we have Eric Hawkins, who is sitting in for Greg today, and Eric is the CEO of Pure Video Networks. After Eric is Chris Jacob, who is the EVP Biz Dev, Sales and Marketing for Podshow. Next up, we have Dan Monahan, who is the Global Infotainment Segment Manager, Mobility Products Group at Intel. And last but not least, we have Scott Boyd filling in for Eric Flanagan, and Scott is Director of AOL Music Programming. So I'm going to start with Gilles Nafarin. I'm going to give you guys just a couple minutes to talk a bit about your own backgrounds, your companies. This is your mini sales pitch session, so I'm going to be watching the clock. No more than 3 or 4 minutes, please.
All right. So my name is Gilles Villan-Rosa. I'm the CEO of Azurius. Azurius is one of the largest peer-to-peer applications in the world. It's been downloaded 128 million times in 100 countries, translated in 40 languages. It's an open source client. We are launching a new version of our application in about 3 weeks that will have DVD quality content, HD content, an ability for content providers of all sorts to upload and share videos in the actual full-size format in which it was filmed. We've signed half a dozen deals, about to be a dozen deals with media companies, and we have a booth, so you're welcome to stop by.
Great.
128 million downloads, he tells me. My name is Roger Raderman. I am the Chief Marketing and Product Officer of Beaker. Beaker is launching this week, and we have developed what we think is the first really compelling, easy-to-use mobile video communication service. So we allow anybody with a video camera on their cell phone to upload what we call a video peak or a beak to Beaker.com and distribute it to their friends online at Beaker, out to their social network pages, back to their cell phone. And the thing that's really nice about it is there's a real sense of immediacy. Once you send a beat from your cell phone, it takes about 15, 30, maybe 60 seconds at the longest for it to pop up on our site for your friends to watch it. So it provides a real sort of real-time view into what you and your friends are doing at any moment in time.
I'm Eric Hawkins. I'm the CEO of Pure Video. Pure Video owns and operates individually branded broadband websites. So the first and largest of these is stupidvideos.com. It streams between 50 and 70 million videos a month to about 5 million unique users. We also have a site called Grind TV, which is essentially MTV for action sports. We'll have 2 more branded properties in the next 12 months. And finally, under the purevideo.com URL, we have a video search engine, a meta video search engine that's designed to provide both access to all the web's video content and give us business intelligence that helps select the verticals that we will publish.
I'm Chris Jacob. I'm the EVP of Sales, Marketing, and Business Development for a company called Podshow. We're essentially an independent media company. So we discover, monetize independent programming on a reasonably large scale. We run about 60,000 programs across our network. We outright own about 3,000 of those shows and monetize them through advertising. So that's what we're up to.
Dan Monahan, I'm with Intel Mobility Group, and so I work with Intel Capital and our business groups to determine companies to invest in, as well as companies to co-travel with, to develop the next great mobile monetization device. So part of the debate I'd like to get into is what is the value chain and the next great mobile device category.
I'm Scott Boyd with AOL Music. I oversee programming and label relations for AOL Music. So I deal with all the record companies. At AOL Music, all of AOL now is free on the web, but AOL Music actually went out ahead, probably almost a year ahead of AOL. So we do lots of normal video programming like other spaces on the web. But we also do a lot of original content, so we have sessions where we have bands come into the studio and perform, we do live shows, etc. That's AOL Music.
Very good, thanks guys. All right folks, let's just jump right into this. I want to start off with a quick survey so I know my audience base here a little bit. How many of you read TechCrunch? Just curious. Show of hands. Okay, very good. How many belong to at least one social network, active user of which? How many of you belong to more than 5 social networks? 3? Okay, interesting here. Very good. How many of you actually listen to podcasts on an active basis? Okay, very good. And last one, how many of you are starting to watch more YouTube than regular TV? Okay, interesting. So I just want to like see. All right, so here it is. I'm going to throw out the VC perspective, and this will set the tone. We can debate this along many different aspects. But I'm going to start out and just say, it's all BS. Web 2.0 is a meaningless term here. It's a shell game where we're all trying to get companies sold to Geliani, Google, eBay, Microsoft, AOL, Yahoo, Amazon News Corp, Interactive Corp, and if you're mobile, throw in VeriSign to get them VI. You raise less than 5, sell for 50, hopefully within 18 months. Everybody makes money, you avoid VCs, maybe you get some angel money in there. It's all the same business plans as 99. The only difference is cost structures are lower. You have more off-the-shelf stacks. Ajax makes things easier to program. India makes things cheaper to program. Broadband's more ubiquitous, and ad infrastructure's in place, and everybody has cell phones. What I do think is interesting, though, here is that this is definitely a bubble in terms of maybe the investment side, but it's not a bubble in terms of the innovation. I love all these sites coming up. I'm a target user, so I call this an innovation room. I did a panel on Web 2.0 with Tim O'Reilly for France Telecom, and his takeaway, which I really agree with, is it's similar to the point in literary theory where Nietzsche came up with God is dead. So if you think about it, what the author's intent is in the media, digital media world has now become a lot less meaningful than the audience's intent. So not to get too abstract, there's a lot of information theory researchers out there writing PhD theses about how at this point in time, the technology, cost structure, access ubiquity has reached the same point where the editorialized intent of media companies no longer matters as much as what audience users want to reinterpret, remix, and program the web themselves. Similar to how Nietzsche went into that whole God is dead, death of author's intention point. So what I do want to start off with is, assuming we all buy into some of these areas, and we'll debate if we do or not, we just had this panel, 3 months ago, Digital Hollywood. So 1 or 2 quick viewpoints. What's changed in the last 3 months besides YouTube being acquired? Is there anything you've seen tangibly in terms of clarity of business models, pace of adoption, pace of competition, scaling internationally? What would you feel is the most exciting thing you've seen that's changed in the last 3 months since we did this panel?
Okay, I'll go first. Somebody had to do it. So what we've seen is massive changes in audience behavior. We predicted a couple of years ago that in 5 years, 50% of the content that you consume will be created by other consumers rather than by mainstream media companies. What we now see is that our network and individual shows in it are doing millions and millions of downloads a month, while the BBC and CNN are doing a few million downloads a month, which we think is pretty interesting. You mentioned international. The other thing that we've seen in the last 3 months is large carrier groups outside the United States adopting wholesale platforms for programming and promotion from here in the US. So we cut a deal with British Telecom that allows us to have access to their 8 million broadband households and their 13 million telephony households from an e-billing standpoint. And they pay us to produce programming across that network as well as to market it to those folks and create original programming to produce for not only broadband, but mobile and IPTV as well. So we're seeing some really encouraging things, not just on the audience side, but on the strategic partnership side as well.
Okay, so you're saying you're hitting an inflection point now where we're overtaking some of the old school media brands and on traffic and adoption and everything else. Okay, any other viewpoints? Anything that's...
I think the two biggest changes we've seen, one is the quality of the content, and that's from two perspectives. Both the users are getting better at creating content that's valuable to look at, and the people who own the most quality content are getting more open to distributing it in ways that users are excited to receive. The second big change is the interest from advertisers is accelerating. So the acquisition of YouTube almost validated the fact that user-generated stuff is here to stay, and no one's going to get sued into oblivion. So let's go spend our money because that's where the audience is. And I've seen that accelerate just the last 3 weeks, not intentionally.
Very good. You know, so what that does say is that this shopping spree will continue for a while. Some quick thoughts, a couple here and there responses. How long is this window open for startups to get acquired? How long does the shopping spree continue by the Gimianis, the media brands, all those guys out there?
Longer than people think and shorter than we think. The top tier, the top tier acquirers, everybody in the Gimiani list that you just mentioned, I think that they get money too quickly, and that window may not be open for all that long. But there are a lot of media companies out there, and specifically media companies that are focused on print or focused on radio. Media companies that need to reinvent or participate in what's going on. And they react a little bit more slowly, and sometimes that's to their advantage, and sometimes it's to their disadvantage. But if this is really here to stay, I think they're going to have to react, and they're going to take a little longer. And maybe they won't pay the same premium that's being paid now, but they'll pay.
Okay.
Yes, even invent a new acronym for not the Gimiani, but the for media companies.
Yeah.
I think over the last maybe 3 or 6 months at least, you can see a shift also on how they are reacting to this user-generated phenomena and having the notion of traditional media sitting next to user-generated or being blended with.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we're seeing a lot of creativity or angst or fear, but I think there's another dam that's about to crack here in terms of how the old media world is going to embrace this movement.
Very good. Okay, I like that. Maybe we'll call that Web 3.0, folks.
Yeah.
How many people do you write blogs out there? Oh, that's it? Okay, well, here's a blog brownie point one. Come up with the acronym for the next Gimiani of the old school media guys. I'm sure you'll win some thought leadership points for that one. I do buy into that. I think that is a pretty interesting next wave of acquires that happens. How long it takes for them to learn? How much they'll spend? Of course, this for debate. We'll see on that. But let's talk a bit. Let's fast forward then through to that vision. Say it plays out. What does the new value chain look like in this world of personalized media and programmable web? And what I'm really interested in, what are the biggest changes versus the past? Who stands the most to gain and who's got the most to lose?
I'll take a crack at that. So, from Intel's perspective, certainly you see two, at least I'm in the mobile group, so we see two, primary value chains. One is the PC OEM model, PC products available through, retail channels and, your typical ways you acquire PCs. And then you have your mobile phone channel, which is largely controlled by the operators. And, we think that it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of this media consumption for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, how are consumers going to consume their content? Are they going to consume that, in a pay-per-view, connected plan with a service provider? Singular, Verizon, Sprint, yada, yada, or is it going to be something that's driven by the user community, more of a Wi-Fi based broadband access where you carry around a device that has a different way of connecting up to the internet, and you'll live with hotspots until that next wave of infrastructure is there. So I think your question about who stands to lose are the operators, and they're strongly going to try to protect that. Who stands to gain? I think the media companies stand to gain. It's a question of what are the consumers going to buy into, and what is the experience that people want to kind of have with them. And so
go further on that.
So I love the way you just painted the WiMAX vision without ever using the word WiMAX. That's pretty interesting. Very, very clever. Any other views? Let's get more specific.
I think- I think
Songs you buy, to be sure, maybe?
To riff on that just a little bit, I think what a lot is going on now with the Web 2.0 and user-generated is what happened not too long ago in music. And obviously, it's just that it's cheaper to create things. It's easier where it used to be, it cost $2,000 a day to go into a studio and record a record. You can do it now at your house with Pro Tools. And from there, and things such as distribution points of what it was at one time, AOL, chat rooms, or Yahoo groups, and now it's obviously MySpace, or putting up your band's video on YouTube. That is allowing the natural growth that the record labels and just bigger companies in the past weren't able to do. It was all hit-based. So it's like if you put out Lost, you're golden. If you put out name however many other shows that have come out and crashed, you're not. And the fact that you can incubate, in a sense, is what I think is so great about what's happening here. I think it's still, it comes down to content and whether it's good or not. And yes, obviously, the more distribution you have, the better, and as many places you can see it, the better. But it's really, my take is like, get it out there, incubate it, see how it goes, and the people have a lot more opportunity to do that now than they have. And it's also funny in the last 3 months thing, I don't think it's happened in the last 3 months, but it's almost like AOL and Yahoo, they're old media already, and it's like, how are they gonna react to Web 2.0, let alone, the networks and the labels and the movie studios. So that's kind of interesting.
Okay. Interesting. What you're hinting at is then the role of tastemakers and distribution. All these things get even more elevated maybe in the new value chain. We'll touch on that in a bit. Any other quick comments here?
Yeah, I think if you look at the sort of the pre-web area where you had content distribution and the point of consumption, which was sort of content was ABC News, distribution was Comcast, and the point of consumption was your TV. I think if you move to the mid-90s, you have Reuters, for example, the point of content, still Comcast to distribute that content but on a dark pipe, and you will watch it on Yahoo. But then now what's happening is I think content is not being aggregated around content, but around users. So it's more effective. Like we were talking about YouTube, but most of the success was actually made online space, which is, so I think what's happening now is that you need to have the content around where people hang out, as opposed to users going to where content is good. And I think this is a major shift that we're seeing.
So what is Google down the road? Is it actually a media company at that point?
I think it's already a media company.
Okay.
I think at one point all those computers come alive. I think probably one of the most interesting things that Google is doing is they're starting to price themselves in their operation in terms of power that the computers cost them to generate. There's a fascinating story in Wired about how they're moving up to the Columbia Valley so they can get hydroelectric power to power all these computers. So the question is, why did they buy YouTube? And so you can see a world where Google AdWords become Google Video Words, and there's just an immense amount of intelligence in the network. What Google has always been about is letting people find what they want, and I think what they're moving to now, obviously, is letting advertisers find people according to where they live and what they want. So I just think it gets, unlike Yahoo and AOL, which are very programming focused, and still have a real editorial drive behind them. It seems to me that Google is building a really intelligent machine to let users find what they want, let advertisers find them, whether that deals with text or video or anything else comes down the line.
Got it. So content and ad exchange then over time. All right, so to wrap this topic up, what I'm hearing is unless carriers become media companies, figure out a way to do that, it should be short and singular and buying every other stock out there where they all transform into media companies over time. Let's talk about the business model that underlies all of this. At the end of the day, is it still eyeballs and advertising we're talking about? Has much changed from 1999? If so, who's going to make and sell all these ads? Does the meaning of advertising change? I want to spend a bit of time on advertising, since that's usually the ubiquitous panacea to the business model question when VCs ask.
you look, I think advertising is always going to be a very significant part of the mix. I mean, we look at advertising as about 60% of our revenue mix, and the other 40% is the licensing of content. And I don't see that advertising is going to go away. As a matter of fact, I think if you talk to people who buy advertising, they would tell you that they want more audience, and we're targeting that audience. And they're not. The problem for them is that they have too many people marketing. The problem is finding the people where they want and having effective ways to spend the money. So I think that you're going to have to get more innovative about how you tap into that pile of money. And I think you're going to have to provide more value for the advertiser, and there's going to be a lot of innovation around that. But advertising as a business model is a very solid business model. There are more people who want to reach people, and there are more people consuming things.
Is this a uniquely U.S. phenomenon? I'm just curious how you guys think about international, because I get bombarded with business plans. The Yelp of India, the MySpace of China. CPMs don't exist in a lot of these markets, so I'm just curious, is it a matter of timing, or is it that you have to innovate on the business model altogether as you scale across regions?
It's less of a problem in certain regions. I mean, I think in places like China, where in order to extract the financial benefit from it, you have to, in each province, have an actual exchange where you get money, mostly out of the mobile phone marketplace from a billing perspective. That's a huge challenge. I mean, you cannot, unless you know that before you go in, you better not be planning on expanding into China anytime soon. And that's something to think about on the way in. In the UK and Ireland and continental Europe, there are large carrier bases for distribution. There are large advertising agencies who, as you said, want to reach their audiences. What we've done over the last maybe 10 years is essentially we've consolidated all the media properties to the point where we've broken the bond between the audience and the hosts on television. You know, 10 years ago, you used to hear DJs on the radio saying, I love this song and I'm going to play it until you love it too, even if my program director fires me. And people actually trusted what they said. And you had people sitting behind the news desks who came on the news at 6 o'clock every evening, and you trusted them to give you the truth. Those days are behind us. And what this new world becomes is essentially a social media environment that's not aggregated by, but at least arbitrated by the audience themselves. And the answer to the question, who wins, is the audience. So the marketers are always going to be looking for that connection between the host and the audience, and the more easily we can provide it to them, the more easily they'll take it up. We take about 85% of our business from conventional global advertisers like Johnson & Johnson and Acura and Procter & Gamble. And what's interesting about those folks is they're not always looking for the biggest audience. Occasionally, they are. They want 18 to 34-year-old urban males, and they want them as many as they can possibly get attached to as many genres of programming as they can possibly get. Others say, hey, look, I have a pet product that I'm marketing, and I just want pet owners. And if there's only 50,000 pet owners in the New York area, see if you can get me to those 50,000, because I'd really rather not advertise to 3 million undifferentiated radio people who, you know, just may not own pets. So there's a directed portion of that in genre-based programming that they can do, and there's also the broad-based stuff that you do on a brand level.
Right. Speaking of that, check out Dogster.com. Very interesting on that, actually.
Dogster.
Yes.
French for dogs is very cool.
Yes. And actually, it is an example of another trend we'll get on in a few minutes. But I want to dive a little deeper into this advertising thing. You've all said advertising here to stay. It's a big portion of the revenue. I would argue, except for things like AdSense and maybe some cool things like what Rever does with pre-roll, post-roll ads, we're still firmly in advertising 1.0. What does advertising 2.0 look like? What should it look like?
I think it involves the audience themselves. So what happens is, instead of agencies and creative people not being creative and buying and planning on the big four sites, no offense to those in attendance on this panel, they can do interesting things. We have advertisers who came to us with their old radio spots trying to air them on audio programming, and the audience said, you know what, we don't like it. And their response to that could have been, well, this must not be the right environment for me, I won't advertise here anymore. What they said was, we'll put our money where your mouth is. You tell us what you think our message ought to be, and then you make that go out across the network. So they ended up doing a campaign that was, twice as large for twice as long, essentially reaching out to the audience and saying, we believe we're a customer-facing company, we want you to tell us we're right, so you guys create the advertising, and we'll use it on a national basis after this campaign's over. So I think advertising 2.0 is coming, and what's happening is the creatives are getting more creative again, the agencies and the planners are actually doing a good job of deploying their clients' money, and the audiences are getting increasingly more involved.
There's a perfect example of this. Verizon did a thing about a year ago for the DCAS, where they went out and got users to produce content and then gave the winning user $25,000 as a production contract, and took the pieces that they produced and put them on DCAS for people to consume. So, and you, as an investor in iSpot, would probably agree that users getting their hands around the media and manipulating it is important. But there's a lot of far simpler things that are being done, some of them that go back to the very basics of advertising, where you're just affiliating a brand with a piece of content or a piece of programming, or you're doing product placement. We do that all the time in our Action Sports property. And so in some ways, advertising 2.0 or advertising 3.0 becomes a lot like advertising 0.5.
Gilles, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just I wanted to add that I think the shift that I think has been talked about all along, but I think is now occurring, is the better relevancy of the advertising to the actual audience and not so much to the content. And that is thanks to user-generated content, or the ability for users to engage and add tags, synopses, comments, and etc. All that metadata is now helping those advertisers to target who they really want to target, which are those pet owners, and not necessarily the content that's attached to it. And so that's one shift that I think is happening right now, and we see plenty of companies that are trying to build the best relevancy engine possible for ads. The other thing, which is, and when you start to look at longer form content, and when the quality of the video is increasing, etc., then you have to shift, to evolve the banner model, for example, because people tend to actually watch longer form content on their PC right now, and then sit back and relax and watch a 45-minute show. So that actually is a challenge from an advertising standpoint, because the question is, okay, do I slap ads on the video, or do I go back to the ad 0.5 where I just do pre-roll and just insert ad in the video? And I think this hasn't been cracked yet, and to me that's the next frontier for advertising.
Have you seen the movie The Island? It's one of the best examples of integrated product placement I've ever seen. I'm sorry, there's a movie out called The Island with Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson and their clones, and they're running around. And it has so much product placement in it. I encourage anybody who's really interested in advertising and the integration of advertising into content to rent the movie. I watched it again last night. GM should have paid, if they didn't pay, $30 million for the financing of this film. Somebody did a bad deal. But it's a fantastic example, and those same principles I think are going to be applied to advertising, whether it's delivered on the web or on a cell phone or
I think we've seen some of the product placement. It's done well in a few things, and then you watch reality TV, and it's just insulting. And I think people get insulted. So a few of the things that I've seen recently, it's not a drastic change, but if you go to a blog and someone is advertising a movie, instead of a banner ad that says click here, go to the site and see this stuff, literally the trailer is embedded in Flash right there. So you know you're not going in, you don't have to leave anywhere, you know how it's gonna act, because people know, at least most people on blogs now know how embedded video works, so you just play it right there, plays the whole trailer through, and then you're done. And that's that, and I've seen recently the same with people selling albums. It's like, listen to the song right here, embedded in Flash, you don't have to go anywhere, and you can decide. So I think there is one thing being that there's a lot of lazy people in the ad agency business, that you can just put anything out, and now there's so many, TiVo's whatever, people tune everything out, and it's really, I think a lot of that is just having to step it up. There's going to be some being able to, put more relevant ads in front of people, but it's also when you have something like the Budweiser What's Up ad, obviously everyone wants that, but yeah, it's less intrusive, and it's actually compelling as is the content.
Okay, interesting. I heard a couple things here, like user-guided, maybe even user-requested, or even user-generated ads. Starts to spark a lot of interesting angles, as well as basic sponsorships and brought to you by some advertising 0.5 content. Okay, talking a bit more about the business model area, I want to explore some more fundamental shifts going on the business model level. Okay, there is advertising, I agree with that. We're moving towards that 2.0. What other innovations are you seeing at more fundamental level in business models? I hear the words freemium a lot, or microtransaction economies. What are examples of more innovative ways to earn money out of Web 2.0 or other models that you've seen?
There has been some experimentation with regard to for-pay programming, and of course our end of the market as a media company is in that area, and I think what we're starting to see now is massive moves on the part of major media to direct-to-consumer propositions, and that's funny because they have always been direct-to-consumer propositions. They've always put those things in front of people on the television channels. It just so happens that that channel is getting less and less crowded with audience members all the time. And so now they're looking for ways to not only control the programming, which is highly produced and high production values and super high quality, and frankly, very expensive, but ways to control the conversation around that programming as well. And that goes to things like you're talking about, where people will participate in a community around the show Lost. There must be a dozen Lost podcasts out there, or programs, both in audio and video, that do nothing except for continue the conversation around that plot line for the other 6 days of the week. And that's a huge benefit to that show. And it retains the audience, it keeps them engaged, and there's probably some interesting monetization propositions in there. On the music side, what we found was people are having a difficult time finding useful stuff that's not going to get them sued into oblivion. And so we created something called the PodSafe Music Network that has about 40,000 independent tracks on it, as well as regular label stuff, if those labels decide to put it up there in the clear as an MP3 and allow people to use it on their shows. And that network has done about a little over 200 million spins, so podcasts who've played those individual songs in the last 12 months. And we think that's kind of interesting, not just because it's an interesting and very large number, but because those bands get back to us through the feedback channel and say, I'm selling more stuff. I used to fill rooms of 100 people, and now I've got a gig in a room with room for 5,000 people. And so there's some real economic benefit to this audience building proposition when you open the network for that kind of cross-promotion. And that's a part of what we're doing on our network.
Cross-promotion, okay, that's definitely one that's of interest. I bring this up also, when I was at the Austin Game Conference, the biggest topic was that the death of the subscription model, because people didn't want to pay $30 a month for World of Warcraft, and they were shifting towards something called the hybrid tiered plus micro item, virtual item transaction economy. Very interesting stuff, but I'm really curious to see when that plays out in MySpace, because I don't think things like MySpace are the advertising monsters that people necessarily think they are. There's probably lots of other untapped gold mines in there, but I'm still not seeing that yet in Web 2.0, sort of the innovation and sort of business model 2.0.
I think there's another thing you need to look at when you talk about, who knows what Web 3.0 is, but I feel pretty strongly that it's going to integrate the computer with the mobile device, so the network becomes the computer, becomes the cell phone, and it all starts working together. And while advertising is certainly the proven business model on the web, it actually goes in the opposite direction when you're starting from the phone. So there's very little advertising on the phone right now, and most mobile companies are supported via, if it's a download, you're paying for a ringtone or a wallpaper. If it's MobiTV, you're paying subscription. So people are used to paying for things, whether it's buy the piece of content or buy subscription on their mobile devices. There are complex and interesting billing structures in place. So I think you got to figure out, how does advertising move to the phone, and how does subscription move to the web? And when we start talking about Web 3.0 and advertising 2.0, it starts mingling together in interesting ways.
Okay, I'll buy that. That's a good thesis, which is when you move content around from different form factors, different mediums, time shift, place shift, people will pay for that convenience level of that somewhat, or maybe they're more used to paying things on a mobile basis. Okay, I think that's definitely an interesting one. How does mobile affect Web 2.0? Is it an integral part, or is it just an extension? What did you guys view on that, maybe?
Let me chime in on that one. So, from the Intel perspective, certainly we're focused on the usage of Web 2.0 and how the different user communities that are evolving access their content or access the Web 2.0 services. So I brought my 4-screen demo. We're certainly focused on the 15 to 35 demographic, which is the up-and-comers, the very, very high web usage. And we're trying to understand what are the usage models that are going to fly in those user demographics. So like, this is BlackBerry Singular. Singular has lots of control over this phone in my experience, and because I want BlackBerry, BlackBerry gets their name on there as well. But this is not a media consumption device by far. I go for this because the email is great. But I think it's just a matter of minutes before the connected iPod is out there, and you see the Zoom coming out there. And I think that the question will be is, how do these large communities of users start to use those sites that start to form? You've got communities like over 100 million Skype users. And so I brought a couple examples, and I'm trying to solve this question because it's the question of what will people carry with them, and what is the experience that goes along with that, and how will that affect monetization. So you've got your operator-controlled mobile phone. This is a Sony Milo device. It's basically keyboard access, Wi-Fi connectivity, but this has Skype built into it with a headset and speakerphone, and they're getting decent adoption. You have your PSP, next level form factor, and these are both Wi-Fi connected devices. So I could, virtually surf the web on these devices. What we find is users are frustrated and they're not surfing the web with these devices. So does Web 2.0 enable ease of use to be able to deliver to the user an experience, and then you can, through that value chain, deliver service, deliver advertising, deliver different monetization. This is an ultra-mobile PC. It's a 7-inch current model, larger screen, kind of is a portable media player, but also can connect to Wi-Fi and deliver an experience that's pretty good for the internet. And then this is kind of the latest. This is a Sony UX, and so this has a 5-inch screen keyboard. It's still pretty thick, still pretty heavy to carry, but this has wireless WAN connection, so this is always connected to the internet anytime, any place. If you want to do a web search, it's there. And so we think that that always connected model where people have sort of developed this dependency on the internet and being able to get information, they're going to always want it with them. And so I think that the paradigm around how do people get that access has got a lot of business opportunity around.
So Dan, would you ever drop the price on that device if it came preloaded with 20% of its storage with ads and content?
Yes, there's subsidized models out there for phones today. I mean, the $300 phone you can get for $50 if you'll sign up for 2 years. This device today is Sony UX is about $1,700 plus a $60 per month connected service plan. You're not quite there yet, but we think with better silicon, other ways of connecting up to the internet at lower price points and smaller, more all-day form factors, it'll be pretty interesting for a lot of these service deliveries.
It'll be interesting to see how quickly this happens too, because I was always of the mind that mobile would take forever. I was a doubter, and we recently noticed that there were a lot of people trying to access our sites on Sony PSP. And so we ran a promotion and we made the content available. And content, by the way, a subset of our content is available for Sony PSP now, but we made it available for the first time in PSP, and 24% of our downloads were PSP. First time. So that's a significant chunk of market share for something that you hadn't offered at all. So the demand is growing, at least with the 12 to 24-year-old demo, faster than I think people realize.
Okay. It's an interesting side. Oh, yeah.
I heard there was some statistics that 20% of the T-Mobile traffic data on the Sidekick, and this is not 3G, was from MySpace. So I mean, doesn't something like that basically say if people really want content, even if they're not the state of the art, they'll find it, even if it means sitting and waiting. Those of us who have slow BlackBerries know that, and I think that's really key.
Right.
The content really is drawing.
Yeah, so there's definitely, despite interface limitations, people will go where they want to, even if it's barely functioning.
Yeah, I think people still want the same content they want. Just because you're on your phone isn't like, you know there's limitations now, so you maybe won't try as much stuff, or you will, but I still want to be able to listen to music or check email or whatever I'm going to do on my computer. For the most part, I want to be able to do it mobile. So I think as that grows as well, you're going to have the same issues with you do about monetization on the web, and that's why I think a lot of people always fall back to advertising, because you're going to have peer-to-peer on your phone. People are going to be able to get movies for free and TV shows for free and music for free, and the whole, why buy something when you can get it for free? And I think it's the same problem's going to go as mobile gets smarter and it's able to do more and more. You need to check in to home base on your computer less and less.
So interesting sidebar. One of the least known targets for all these biz dev deals for content advertising these days on the mobile side is actually SanDisk. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to pre-bundle a lot of content and advertising into, say, 20% of that 1 gig card. I mean, wouldn't you like a lower cost card if it was 20% of it pre-bundled with some stuff on it?
Another thing that people miss, we like to think of ourselves as the leading edge of technology in the US, but where mobile is concerned, we're probably way behind. I mean, our networks are behind. The audience, for want of a better description, is not as sophisticated here as they are in Europe and the Pacific Rim. This phone is this is the E61 that was launched in Europe about 6 months ago. It has 802.11, now that we're doing phone demos. 802.11 and a full-size browser and all that kind of stuff. And Nokia actually did an end run on the carriers and put a podcasting application on the device, which means that regardless of what the carrier says, if you're hooked to an 802.11 connection, or even if you're using their 3G connection, you can download whatever you want to. So another interesting thing about the international mobile marketplace is the carriers aren't always in control. In some markets, the handset manufacturers control those propositions. So you really, if you're looking at the global marketplace, you have to, particularly in mobile where there's 2 billion handsets in the market by the end of this year, you really have to look carefully at what market it is you're trying to enter with your programming or your advertising or whatever it is, and make sure that you're tuning it right for the consumption models there. Now, interestingly, Singular launched this phone last week called the E62, and they turned the 802.11 off. Why do you suppose they did that?
That's actually a big choke point in mobile 2.0 actually these days, is that you only have 3 ways to go to market. You do a carrier on-deck deal, that's got limitations there. You get an off-deck distribution deal with Yahoo or whoever wants to enter the market. A lot of phones can't handle off-deck distribution quite yet. And then you try to go pre-bundle it with the handset maker. They'd love to, except the carrier will threaten not to sell that phone if they actually turn that function on. But this gets to the point of distribution bottlenecks, so I'm glad you brought that up. Each of these, mobile or web or international, they all have different distribution bottlenecks here. And this one specifically for the startup guys, how do you do this whole tools versus white label / yellow label versus build your own community type of balance there? What's the right path, especially now post YouTube, MySpace days? How do you juggle that between being a tools vendor or build your own community?
We actually do it. We have properties that are launched specifically to be tools that will have high organic growth and attract large audiences. That's pure video search. And we have web destinations that are built to be high retention, high RPM media properties. And whether or not you're going to go and take your tool, like a consumer-facing tool, and then white label it for someone else is, from our perspective, largely a business decision that will be driven by whether or not someone's going to pay you to do that, or there's a strategic imperative for it. But certainly, I think that when we make our product decisions, we definitely look at them through that lens. Is this a tool or is this a media property? And if it's a tool, it has a specific purpose and it's built a certain way and it's marketed a certain way. And if it's a destination, it's slightly different.
Can startup do both?
We have. So yes, I think startups can do both. I think that startups be both consumer-facing product engines and white label shops. I've seen a lot of startups struggle with that. Can startups build more than one product and support it successfully? Yes, if they're very careful about what it is they're building and understand why they're building it.
Okay, gotcha.
I think if you look at the peer-to-peer space, you can actually combine both, being an infrastructure and being a destination, because one scales with the other, for 2 reasons. First of all, I think in order to build a really good tool and infrastructure, you need to actually experience, millions of users as opposed to thousands. And secondly, the capacity of the network scales with its audience. So I think at least, we don't really see peer-to-peer on the mobile yet, because there's some infrastructure sort of barriers to completely overcome. But on the web, I think both go hand in hand. And as you scale as an audience, you also scale as a tool and infrastructure and as sort of bandwidth provider, basically. Okay, Roger, take it.
This really goes to the core of what Beaker is trying to do. Most of the discussion around mobile talks about content going to the phone. We are really trying to get people to start using the video cameras in their mobile phone to start communicating with one another. This is an early behavior, so the challenge is how do you get people to adopt it? So as we're developing our product, we think Beaker is a brand and we think it's a destination, but we also think that mobile video communication is, just as the phone just once did audio only and then is now a texting device and also for photographs. We think that it will become that pervasive. So as we're designing everything that we do, we think of really two objectives. How do we educate the consumer and have a one-on-one relationship with the consumer at Beaker.com? But also, how do we enable all the other use cases and all the other potential partner sites to introduce mobile video communication into their communities? Because it's a very specific thing that we're doing, a very specific infrastructure that we're building. Most people don't want to do it, but it is the ultimate form of user-generated content, if you will. Everybody's got one on them at all time. They record it, they press send, and it can show up anywhere. So in terms of are we a tool or are we white labeling, we're really not white labeling, but we are always in conversations with business development partners that feed directly into our product development cycles. So Beaker, for some people, might be a destination. For other people, it might be a console where you're setting up your groups and your privacy levels, but you're experiencing the majority of the site through a syndicated player via a partner.
Interesting. So I hear you're doing both. Which comes first, though? Is your destination site ultimately sort of an education tool that drives more demand for white label and therefore better?
We're not white labeling right now. White labeling is not a business we want to go into so much. You can look at it. Beaker.com. It's designed like a player almost. It's closer to a Gmail than a YouTube. Okay. So it's designed to capture, intelligently organize, and distribute massive amounts of mobile video. So some people might use it as a console, like a command center, and we have a player, and very soon we'll have different versions of players, so people can come to Beaker and say, I want this player to show only my mobile videos to my friends, I want this player to take all of my friends' feeds, and I want us all to communicate it on a MySpace page. So I think that the distinction between destination site and white labeling and all this stuff, I think it's starting to break down a little bit. We're not in a world, for example, where this is not an enterprise software world anymore. So for us to integrate with any kind of third-party website, we don't have to integrate with legacy systems. We don't. This isn't a mission-critical application. And so when we're designing our products, we're like, okay, now we have to do this business development. But while we're doing this business development, we want our product people to be there too, so we can build a product that takes the business development people out of the loop, and people who want to use mobile video communication come to Beaker, and without touching us at all personally, can hook into our network.
Interesting. Big company guys, what is your perspective really quickly? A lot of folks would argue that big companies would rather buy tool sets, not communities, or maybe less, but a lot of startups want to build communities because you control your own destiny. What is your view in terms of what is that's on a premium for shopping list?
My view on that is that, and we have an example of it right now, we have Uncut Video, which is our version of YouTube. Does same exact tools, does everything, you can upload video, etc., and then you have YouTube. And it's, you can replicate it and you can make it just as good, but it's the building the community that is the difficult part, and that's where you're gonna win or lose. And so it's very easy to copy a lot of the stuff that's out there now, and people have done it time and time again, but MySpace is still MySpace, and YouTube is still YouTube. And if you can make something it's that much different and that much better, but we have a gigantic audience at AOL, and it's not a simple translation of like, oh wait, now we have YouTube, you don't need to go to YouTube anymore. We have our own thing uploaded here, because it's like building anything, It's just having the tools is not near enough.
Okay.
From the Intel side, it's kind of both large investments and small investments. So You look at something around WiMAX, like the investment in Clearwire, which is building WiMAX infrastructure out in North America, $500 million investment. I mean, that's major heavy lifting in trying to enable cities to have always connected wireless services at lower cost than you have to pay today. But then we also look at companies like, I'll give you a couple examples, like Ant Mobile is a company that we've invested in. That's they come from the phone space and they really know where the carriers find value in delivering services, and they're going after that 18 to 24 demographic that wants to be connected to cool MTV and some of the hot communities. We were an early investor in Jamdat a while back, which is mobile gaming, and very successful investment. So for smaller companies, I would say we're definitely interested in looking at companies that know how to build a community, how to really enrich that community experience. Our large investments are usually larger infrastructure that are going to move a lot of products.
Interesting. Okay. Last topic before we open up to the audience here. We have to address the what's after YouTube thing because it's already been done. So what is after YouTube? Is it that social networks?
Beaker.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Is it that social networks and user-generated content starts to re-verticalize? What is it? The pendulum swing the other way? What starts to form Web 3.0 here?
So we voted on that thing you just said. I mean, if you look at it's sort of a different example. I like to use the example of Match.com, which became this big giant heavyweight in dating, and then you just got niched to death. So it was JDate, it was Planet Out, and it was everybody had their spin on dating. It was very specific to them. And we look at YouTube, it's this massive, incredibly successful, unstructured video upload site, and I think what's going to happen is structure is going to be brought to that world, and that structure will be the context that drives success in particular communities. And the closest analog I have is what happened in the print space. It used to be you had periodicals like Time and Newsweek, and those were the big heavyweights, and those were what people bought. And then there came a world when print was still doing very, very well, where you had 6,000 print publications, and each one of them had an audience, and you could make a successful media business out of that. And that's why we build branded channels. But I certainly think...
Looking at their MySpace pages. So you have this world where all information is scanned pretty easily, and I think as we evolve, people start paying more attention to what they're exposing to the world at large. So I don't know if the phenomenon of social networks as fully places of absolute and total openness and discovery continues. It might start narrowing down, and they start becoming more private experiences.
Interesting. Yes.
I think there's also a sort of quality and technology angle here, which is, to me, the next YouTube will be the one by which you can actually share professionally produced videos, so the micro-publisher segment. There's like a vast amount of content that is not being distributed today because it's just uneconomical, and you can find versions of it on YouTube, but they are like 5-minute little grainy streams. And so I think, to me, one of the next things that will happen, transversally to what you said here, is that this experience is going to become much closer to TV and DVD type quality, and that's going to change quite a bit of things.
Actually, I think that's happening now. I think in a world where you have the single dip sort of video sites and profile-driven social networks on one side, and News Corp, Viacom, CBS Inc., Disney, and so forth on the other side, there's a huge opportunity in the middle for high-quality, serialized, episodic programming. And networks will emerge, sort of creating the best of the social element of that, which is the viral nature of social networks, and the high production values without the necessary expense that seems to be happening on the sort of generalized media side. There is an interesting blend happening now. We see it all the time, taking these properties from 0 million downloads a month to millions and millions of downloads a month. Their production values get better, they hire producers, the producers figure out what the storylines are going to be, and you see these things developing into full-fledged media properties, and that creates an even stronger bond between the host and the audience, and that bond is easily marketed to somebody who wants to sell a product against it. And, by the way, it makes the show more entertaining.
Very good. Final question. This one's a toughie here. Is there room for another horseman? Wave 1 of internet-generated, old Gamiani enforcement. Does Web 2.0, Web 3.0 actually create another big horseman out there? Or do they all really are destined to belong in bigger media shops, as we talked about, how media conglomerates get larger and larger in scale and everything becomes a media company over time?
So there was, there used to be ABC and CBS and NBC, and they said there couldn't be a fourth network, and then there was Fox. So I say, yeah, there's probably room for another one. And betting against that would be betting against the paths of history if, and I don't like to make those kind of bets.
Yes.
Actually, I'm not so sure because I think the example on the TV networks is that those are pretty focused businesses, whereas if you look at what you have on the web today, those are more like constellations where they will have e-commerce, search, video, communication, mobile, etc., and they have aggregated all these businesses over time. So for another one to emerge, they will have to basically build those same business,
A whole stack.
exactly the whole stack, and it may take time.
Interesting. Yeah, Dan?
I think the world's going to get very interesting when you have the kind of capability you'll have in portable devices that can capture video, connected up to communities, where people spend a lot of time on those communities about what's happening around their community with video consumption. I think there's room for advertising play there. Anecdotally, there was the cat fight. So it was a video of a fight broke out between all these businesswomen, like real fight. And this guy had his mobile video camera on there, and he was able to capture it, and he, videoed this cat fight between all his one of the #1 hit videos for a week with the video. So I think that that those community-based content submitted communities are going to get a lot more bizarre, as well as a lot more popular. And I think that there's room for some models there to play out in those spaces. So.
Thank you, guys. Okay, it seems like on the big notes here, I think we do have a shopping list for what Web 3.0 is, and there's still a need for me to be putting money into that.
Okay.
Very grateful. So to recap here, before we turn it over to you guys to ask questions, it seems like Web 3.0 is an amalgam of several things. One, true integration with mobile. You really get on mobile devices everywhere. Two, more complex and at the same time simpler ad models that you can replace, maybe more comprehensive ad models. You have a set of old media buyers that line in the picture. You have deeper, richer, maybe smaller segments with some editorial structure coming into play. So maybe a re-verticalization of some of these broader platforms on the UGC side. More hybrid business models, such as the so-called bling business model, where people pay to personalize and whatnot. Tastemakers get very important, specifically around search, discover, recommend. I heard an interesting notion. With these deeper, richer, verticalized segments, you get a hybrid. You get copyright content entering the picture, and you get user-produced. As opposed to today, I still think YouTube is a lot of user ripped-off content, not what I call user-generated. And lastly, you get layers of privacy and trust in there as also another sort of verticalization. That's pretty interesting. Folks, with that, there should be a rich discussion for questions from the audience. Who would like to start this out? Yes.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's no business model, that you have a business model today, but the business model is consistently changing, and with the new technology. So for a startup, how can they make sure they're capitalized enough versus undercapitalized, and what amount would that be to keep up with the trends as the technology changes?
Very good question. Okay, good. Anybody want to take a stab?
Start making money right away. So this will be my 5th startup, so I should have some kind of support group, I guess. But I think the mistake that a lot of people make is that very inclination, is how much capital do I need to raise so that I can lose money for 24 months and build an audience so that I can later apply somebody else's business model to my business and start breaking even. That, I think, in my humble opinion, is a grave error. If you don't plan your business with the money as part of it, you're probably making a mistake. We've seen a lot of that over the last 12 years. Some of them worked out and some of them haven't. But I think if you do go into it thinking this is a real business that needs a real business model at the very beginning, I mean, we have essentially in our business the Holy Trinity: the audience, the programmers, and the advertisers. Those three people we care about. And those are the three people we've always been focused on. The audience is the primary because without them, nothing works. The programmers are the people who do the stuff that make the audience show up, and the advertisers are the blood that flows through that body and makes it move around. So there wasn't a single day that we looked at this company that we didn't think, okay, we need to be making money the first day we're in business. Otherwise, we're not in business.
Sorry, but YouTube breaks that rule, right?
I said there are certain exceptions, but I think if you look at the math behind the acquisition, if you buy MySpace, if you take $900 million and buy advertising on MySpace, and then you see a property you can buy for $1.6 billion and get 100% of that advertising revenue for the same 30 million uniques, that's a pretty good move.
Yeah, Google bought a lot of its revenue back. I mean, depending on who you believe, there are so many people sitting on YouTube that they could be generating as much as $5 or more million a month in pay-per-click ads. So, if they're receiving 60 or 70% of the revenue, that means there's 90 or $100 million of revenue running through the pipes at run rate. Which means if you pay 1.6 for it, it's expensive, but it's not as crazy as people think. So, and that's just monetizing at baseline with the basic plumbing of Google and pay-per-click ads, which is the way MySpace monetized until they hired Salesforce, and now they do what? I mean, somebody told me $400 million a quarter in brand advertising, which is a lot of money. So, and that may be wrong. I don't know if that number's right because I heard it from some random person and I was only half listening. The point is that there's a lot of money to be made, and YouTube, even though they're spending a ton, is making some.
But guys, the spirit behind the question is, do you really know the business model at the start, or is it more a carefully controlled set of experiments? How often are you right about that first notion of what you think the business model is, and how do you adapt?
Well, I think that, look, we thought that we would do 60% of our revenue in advertising and 20% in syndication and the remainder of that in transactions for content. And we do about 60% in advertising and about 40% in content licensing. We don't really do any transactions business. But to the point, you need to know how you're going to make money even if you're wrong when you start. And then you can adjust. If you just go in with, I'm going to have people there, although to be fair, just having people there that was very 99. If you have enough people there, you can make money. There's a thing called Google. There's that plumbing is there. So there's an argument to be made that if you're really sure you can get a lot of people there, that's going to be a business.
But I have to say there's still a little 99 coming back. I think it's not really only about eyeballs, but I think there's a lot to be said about creating the right user experience from the start. And maybe you don't have the right business model, but you create something of value to the consumer, and that is sort of what people are looking for right now. Also, I think this time around though, I don't think you have the same capital issue that you may have had before, just because it doesn't cost a lot of money to launch a Web 2.0 company. Really, you take a bunch of open source products, a few servers, and if you've got something that's sticky, that's good enough to launch. Doesn't mean you have a business model, but at least you can launch something. And there's also a whole bunch of VCs ready to pay some stupid price for it.
I think there's a lot of different models, and I think that the keys for a startup are that you have a plan, that your plan is executable with the resources that you have committed to your plan, or in the wings, ready to come on board to execute that plan. And it's really about defining your goals. If Intel, for example, wouldn't shy away from a plan that has a 3 to 4 year break even based on an assumption of going after a particular type of audience. So there's many different kinds of plans. One plan would be to try to turn profitable as quickly as possible. But it really depends on the goal, the scope, and kind of how much robusto you're going after in your startup. So don't shy away from visionary thoughts if it takes investment to get down the road to get there.
Well, my problem is as the investor, I have enough money, I just don't know what to ask for in terms, I have no idea of what it will actually cost in terms of with the trend with technology.
Roger, do you have a thought on comment?
I've done, I think I've started 4 companies. First was iPhone.com. We raised, I think it was $60 million, something like that. Next was a company called Obscura Digital, and we built, I don't know, we'll probably do 6 or 7 million in revenue this year on $250,000. Beaker is all angel funded right now, and I have found, again and again and again, it's just my personal philosophy, it's all about the team that you put together. So if you don't know the answer to that question, the people you need to be talking to are not the VCs, but rather you need to find somebody to complement your own skill set, can help you understand a very fundamental issue.
Well said. We have 5 minutes left. I'm going to get more questions. Yes.
Hi. Seems to me we keep talking about business models, but I hear advertising, transaction, and maybe subscription. And so if there's another one that I'm missing, that's sort of, I know there's all kinds of combinations, but is there really a lot other choices? Is that what we're trying to develop here? And I think the one that's underused or discussed is subscription model. And my question would be, if there were a MySpace that was prettier and context sensitive and searchable and interesting, wouldn't some of us pay as a member to subscribe to a service or a tool that was a community that we wanted to be part of?
Yeah, it's called eHarmony. It exists.
It's actually called World of Warcraft.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah. Yes, but I mean, I think that you're not going to get the same scale, so you make a bet early on. Do I want a business with tremendous scale and 30 million people coming, or do I want a business with 1 million people, all of them paying me $30 a month? And either one's a viable strategy. I think that in Web 2.0, you have I think a lot of the people who are here will tell you that consumers can be pretty fickle, and asking them to pay before you've reached critical mass and have something that they really want to pay for is a way to retard your growth pretty significantly.
And someone's always going to come up with, or try and come up with your subscription model and offering that for free. Because then it's like, oh, users, even music subscription services, people are trying to figure out, how do I offer this for free? Oh, we do it for advertising, because there's always people out there that want the same stuff for free, and they will put up with a little more in the way of inconvenience, etc.
Well, part of the question was what premium features makes them want to jump over to subscription. Again, when we talk about freemium as a big buzz phrase out there, what is the premium portion of the freemium that you actually see working? Have you seen any examples?
I think Flickr does a really nice job.
Oh, okay.
Well, there's some historical examples too. I mean, we launched Sportsline in August of 1995. Lock on the door, right? $4.95 a month or $49.95 a year. And 6 months later, ESPN made 80% of their programming free. So sometimes your competitors make that decision for you. I do think there's a place for better quality. You're starting to see not only whole niche businesses growing up around MySpace for different ways of dressing up your site and so on. There's companies that are either white label or more entertainment-oriented social networks that their business model is they sell the components. So if you're a business or an individual who wants the greatest possible social networking profile in the universe, then you pay bits and pieces for these different elements and you take that on. So I think there are, you're right, blends of those different models, and there's nothing in our model that says we won't have people paying for content or buying music or working with media companies that want to sell through our audience or their audience on our network. But right now the core of the business is free to the audience and supported by advertisers.
One more question. Yeah.
I think all of you have said this, there's an enormous amount of user-generated content, and maybe the growth rate is exponential. Are there any services or entrepreneurs going through that and analyzing all this new stuff to find the next Steven Spielberg and try to monetize, get a hold of that person, and turn it into something that is really for replicating the high quality? Most of it is not high quality, it's something else. But there are a few things in there that are really, really good.
I think a lot of people are getting is it, you know, TV production deals, writing deals, whatever, out of that. The quote-unquote Chinese Backstreet Boys, who did the karaoke to the Backstreet Boys, now make millions of dollars, whatever, going to Asia, hosting parties or being on shows or whatever. So I think there's definitely tons of that, and for sure in the music world, that you're going out and you're, you know, finding the next up-and-coming band on MySpace. Oh, they have tons of friends, and maybe they're a good band, let's check them out, and they're getting signed to big deals. So I think there are, in that media part of it, there are plenty of people doing that.
One final,
Sorry. In 3 weeks, we're launching a product called Direct Edition, which allows you to upload a full-length movie in DVD quality and share it on MySpace. So that's, I think one thing that has to happen for this to emerge is to have the quality of the content being higher and longer form. Otherwise, you end up with, you know, more of the sort of 5-minute type clips.
last question.
Excellent panel, by the way, to get these guys on their toes. Just a question, you know, there's been a lot of talk as the baby boom generation gets older, the grain of America and how that has a positive effect on the economy. I would argue that if anyone's been to a mall lately, you know, with all of the user-generated content and all of the social networking explosion, you know, to me there's an unsocializing of America going on, where these kids just, they don't know how to socialize. And I'm only in my early 30s, and, you know, compared to when we grew up, and being able to interact, you know, with adults and interact with each other. Do you, first of all, do you agree with that? And secondly, you know, do you think there's going to be a point when the user says, you know, enough is enough, I've got 40,000 friends on MySpace, and I haven't met one of them in real life. I've logged about 12,000 hours on YouTube watching, you know, pretty much the same type of video over and over again. And, you know, what am I getting out of this? How is it benefiting my life? Do you think the user will get to that point? And if not, you know, how is that going to affect our economy? Because besides mobile, if you go to Europe, and if you go international, you know, it's just a lot more social over there. And people are out meeting each other. They're out interacting. So, you know, just curious as to any thoughts on that.
Let's take a vote.
My wife's a high school teacher, so she shows me some of the emails she gets. And it's like, yo, cuz I need the thing. Z's, lots of Z's. And so, yes, I've seen the trend. Of course it concerns me, and no, I don't think it's going to stop. I think we'll just get dumber and dumber and dumber.
So in 3 months, wait for our next panel, second life disorder. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you.